This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5-Watt World. We're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. As my friend John Cordy asked us last year, what's wrong with Yamaha guitars? Yamaha really seemed to come into their own in the last few years. That left me curious about why Yamaha hasn't been a bigger part of my own guitar journey. So, you know me, I had to go digging to get an answer to see how a company that has a history of listening to players all the way back to the 1960s hadn't really caught on, until now. So if you want to know the history that led to the current crop of excellent instruments, then stay tuned, because this is the 5-Watt World short history of Yamaha electric guitars and basses. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe, or grab a t-shirt, hoodie, or a Stomp preset pack to support what we do. And to become a bigger part of 5-Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon. There's a friend level that suit any budget. The links are in the description. Torakusu Yamaha formed Nippon Gaki Company in 1897, and that little organ company has grown into the largest producer of musical instruments in the world. The guitar division was created in 1941 as a subdivision of the piano production, but was put on hold during World War II. In 1946, the guitar group was moved into their own space and became known as the Yamaha Guitar Custom Shop, the same custom shop in operation today. At the start, the team had great woodworking skills from building pianos, but little to no experience building guitars. Interested in building traditional classical guitars, they looked to the great luthier houses in Spain, repair shops in the US, and to music stores and musicians worldwide for their ideas. Yamaha's first efforts in guitar building were with classical instruments, and it's relevant to our history here only in so much as it helped to create a pattern in the company for gathering information and applying it to the guitars. In 1966, Yamaha brought Eduardo Ferrer, a traditional classical guitar builder from Spain, to come to Japan to work with their designers and builders. And in the 70s, they would bring Manuel Hernandez to Japan to carry them forward yet again. The Beatles appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show in February 1964 would pull Yamaha into the electric guitar business. They began building the electrics in 1965 at their guitar facility in Hamamatsu, Japan. The designs embraced the experimental feeling of the 60s with wild curves and extended headstocks, lots of switches, lots of gadgets. In the naming convention of Gibson, with SG standing for solid guitar, Yamaha rolled out their SG2, SG3, SG5, and SG7. The wildly innovative shape was certainly a love it or hate it proposition, taking a risk that paid off as the guitar's price point made them very attractive in the marketplace. Electric basses were launched at Fender and became more commonplace by the time of the Beatles in '64. Yamaha built their first electric basses in 1966 with the SA2. By the mid-'70s, we'd see the first double offset horn basses in the SB range, culminating with the SB 1200S, which would give us a hint of what was to come. If the Beatles and later Hendrix drove guitar sales through the roof, the surf music craze hit Japan particularly hard and has never really waned there. Instrumental bands like the Ventures and the Surfaris had the bands with the Mosrite and Fender guitars on the cover of their albums, and so Yamaha followed suit, showing Japanese bands playing their guitars. In the 1990s, Yamaha would reissue the SG7 and the SGV, the V standing for vintage. Of course, the 60s into the 70s saw the booming folk movement with Bob Dylan, Arlo Guthrie, and Simon & Garfunkel bringing loads of new players to the acoustic, and Yamaha steel string guitars were there. Along with that was the crossover electric 12-string sounds of the Byrds and the Beatles, and to answer that demand, Yamaha launched their first electric 12-string in 1967, the SG12A. Following on the heels of the SG guitars, but with an extended headstock to manage the additional tuning machines. Also in the 70s, Yamaha created a guitar building facility in Taiwan to lower manufacturing costs of the more economical models. They still build guitars there today. And in 1997, Yamaha was early to recognize that Indonesia was about to become the next center of low-cost instrument manufacturing, and they founded Yamaha Music Manufacturing of Indonesia. The 70s came on, the Beatles had broken up, and the surf scene had receded into the hidden backwaters of the guitar world. Instead, monsters walked the earth, arena-filling bands like Led Zeppelin and The Who. Twang and chime were replaced with thick, powerful tones coming from humbucker-equipped solid-body guitars, plugged into amp stacks, filling the back of the stage. In response, Yamaha tried the single-cut SG40 and SG45 models. Released in '72, they showed a new level of quality control at Yamaha, but no major players picked them up, and they wilted on the vine. But as those single-cut guitars dropped from the vine into fertile soil at Yamaha, they gave fruit to the guitar that would be their answer, the double-cut SG series. The SG-175 was conceived in 1974, and the first guitars were built the next year. Despite the somewhat confusing name, the body's thick slab of mahogany had more in common with a Les Paul than an SG. They would later change the name to SBG for the US market. Early models featured both bolt and set necks, but it was the neck-through SG-2000 that would give Yamaha its much-needed star power boost. Yamaha would finally find that star power collaborator for design that they needed to get on the map in Carlos Santana. By the time he appeared on the cover of Guitar Player magazine in June of '78, Santana had been working with the craftsmen at Yamaha for a couple of years. He asked them to add more wood to the body, use thicker frets, and add a brass plate under the top where the tailpiece met the body, so, quote, when you hit the guitar, it will resonate like a piano, end quote. Yamaha would end up receiving a U.S. patent for the design of the T-Cross system. This was two flanks of mahogany running along the maple neck, which increased stability and added to the tone and resonance. In addition, there was a sustained brass plate that coupled to the Tunematic-style bridge and was mounted under the top. In the SG-2000, the combination of features gave Santana just what he was looking for. Santana's rig at the time of the seminal Moonflower album was the Yamaha SG-2000 set up with very low action and a set of 8s into a Blonde Boogie Mark I with a single Altec 12-inch speaker. The SG-2000 would be Santana's main guitar until 1982, a period that defined his sound for many of us. Yamaha's custom shop would build some beautiful custom SG guitars for Santana, further cementing the high-end aspects in our minds. The visibility that Santana provided touring with his custom SG-2000s gave Yamaha exactly what they needed. Further, they entered the higher-end segment of the market at a time when the American companies were seen as resting on their laurels, and the quality at Fender and Gibson was in steep decline. For this reason, many players were willing to try one of the SG, or SBG as they were known in America. Andy Taylor with Duran Duran, and Bob Marley used SBG guitars around that time. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. I'm currently having fun going through Joe Bonamassa's Blues Rock Masterclass. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5WAT35, or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up now to start your journey to being a better guitarist. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. In '77, alongside the groundbreaking SBG 2000, Yamaha released the BB 1200. Though the market was dominated by bolt neck basses, Yamaha decided to go upscale and build the BBs as a neck-through design. This upscale feature set them apart, and even Paul McCartney played a BB 1200S in the early '80s. Session superhero Abraham Laboriel, one of the most recorded bassists in history, also settled into using Yamaha basses early on, using one on Lionel Richie's All Night Long, among many, many other hits. And Van Halen's Michael Anthony used a BB 2000 in the mid-'80s. Anthony's use of the basses would eventually lead to his own signature in the late '90s, the BB 3000 MA. Also in the mid-'80s, that sideman to the stars, Nathan East, began his career-long relationship with Yamaha. East would eventually tour with Eric Clapton, Phil Collins, George Harrison, Elton John, and far too many others to fit in here. Some of these touring bassists were buying their instruments when they were in Japan, but Yamaha was beefing up their U.S. team, and they reached out to a young, up-and-coming bassist, Billy Sheehan. Sheehan had tried a BB 3000 in a music shop right after playing an Alembic, the Rolls-Royce of basses at the time, and said he couldn't believe how well the Yamaha stacked up. Sheehan embarked on a back and forth with Yamaha that eventually yielded his signature bass. Starting with his vintage Precision bass as a template, they began tweaking all the things that Sheehan could dream up. I don't have room here to go into all the specs, but one of the most notable features was the scalloping on the fretboard up high to facilitate string bending and vibrato. Yamaha took what it learned from Sheehan and released the Attitude Bass series in a variety of pickup configurations. At the same time, they issued a line of single-coil-equipped double-cut guitars with single-sided headstocks, the SC1200, 1000, 800, and 700. These had super switches that yielded many more tones that were innovative and would lead many builders to copy in the years to come. As the 70s came to an end, the release of Van Halen 1 changed everything in the guitar world. By 1980, Yamaha was building the SF3000, a single humbucker whammy bar equipped model right out of the Frankenstrat mold. As the 80s progressed, guitars got pointier and locking tremolo systems became a commonplace, and Yamaha's RGX series of guitars embraced both. But custom guitars built for top player ambassadors was a growing trend, and in 1989, they established the Yamaha Guitar Development Group in North Hollywood, California. Here they could modify existing models to suit top players, and they could also create all new models working with those players, producers, and recording studios in the area. One of the first designs to come from YGD were the Pacifica and the Weddington. The Weddington was a fancy single-cut guitar with a highly figured top and innovative pickup switching. Yamaha had become known for these innovative electronics, but it was the Pacifica that would carry them forward. The first models, the 812, 821, and 904, were seen as superstrats. They supported fast, slim necks with compound radius fingerboards made for Yamaha by Warmoth. They were loaded with DiMarzio or Seymour Duncan pickups, and many came with authentic Floyd Rose tremolos. By 1990, Nathan East had been playing a BB3000 for a few years, and they started talking about a custom bass for him. The 5-string neck-through bass features an alder and maple body with a mahogany and maple neck with an ebony fingerboard. Listen to East's recording with Eric Clapton across this time to hear his signature bass tones. Over the long term, East's model evolved to include both a 5- and a 6-string model. Dream Theater's John Myung developed a 6-string extended range model that led to the signature bass, the RBX JM2. One of the best-known Yamaha electric bass players is jazzer John Patitucci, who made a name for himself early in his career in Chick Corea's electric band. Corea was a Yamaha piano and also drum artist. Through these relationships, Patitucci had the chance to develop and design his own perfect custom bass that led to the 26-fret, 35-inch scale 6-string TRB JP2. Most recently, Patitucci has worked with Yamaha to create a custom semi-hollow 6-string bass. Not a production instrument yet, but too beautiful to not include here. The first Pacifica guitars were released in 1990 as a collaboration between California and the factory back in Japan. The first prototypes were designed by Rich Lasner, working with guitar builder Leo Knapp. Initially a test project that Yamaha Japan greenlighted into production guitars later on. Two entry-level instruments, the PAC 012 and the PAC 112, were launched to compete with Fender's budget model, Squier, and Made in Mexico models at the time. These two models would go on to be some of the best entry-level guitars ever produced and were often the gateway to other brands. This might have been due to the lack of truly professional-grade models in these early lines, other than guitars coming out of the LA Custom Shop. Though there have been mid-price Pacifica guitars over the years, they only recently began building a pair of truly professional-level Pacificas that we'll come to at the very end of the video. Yamaha Guitar Development sought out new players as ambassadors. Enter Ty Tabor. King's X had developed a strong underground following among guitarists. Tabor used their guitars in the early years of the band, and then in the 90s they developed a signature model. King's X were early users of lower tunings, and to facilitate that, Yamaha built him a 26.5-inch scale guitar, appropriately named the Drop 6, and many other companies followed suit. Fusion jazzer Frank Gambale approached Yamaha and worked with them to build a signature double cutaway guitar. Like Tabor, he worked directly with the Yamaha Guitar Development Shop, and many of his ideas of his signature guitars would end up in the AES line of solid body guitars. Single-cut guitars shaped in a variety of pickup configurations built in full range of price points. Yamaha had played with some early hollow and semi-hollow designs in the 60s, but they really made their mark starting in the 70s with the SA semi-hollow body guitars. The SA 1000 and 2000 guitars were used by top studio guys in LA. Tommy Tedesco and Carlos Rios both used them, and Robin Ford played an SA 1000 briefly. The Yamaha California Custom Shop now became involved in developing the archtop guitars as well. The AES 1500 would become a favorite of artists in a wide variety of styles. The guitar had unique DiMarzio DLX Plus pickups, which were P90-sized hum-canceling pickups. The push-pull tone pots allowed them to be split for more single-coil tones. Nashville session player Kenny Greenberg became a big fan of the guitar and had several of them with different pickups in them. He said, "To me, they're sort of a cross between a 335, a Gretsch, and a Guild." Interestingly, the 1500 ended up appearing in many different contexts. Sideman Greg Lights used a 1500 on a project with Bill Frisell, crossing over from jazz to Latin to Americana. Or Troy Van Leeuwen in A Perfect Circle and in Queens of the Stone Age. Van Leeuwen had been playing 335s and Epiphones, but found the 1500 walked the line between them. He also used the fancier SA2200, semi-hollow double cutaway guitar, finding them to hold up well under the rigors of the road. Jazz guitarist Mike Stern was playing jazz on a Telecaster when a real jazzer was still expected to play a fat jazz box with flat wounds. He was playing a Tele that he'd bought from Danny Gatton until it was stolen from him at gunpoint at a bus stop in Boston. He then put together a parts caster to keep going. By now, it's the late 90s, and Yamaha approached him about building him a better T-shaped object to his specifications. 5 guitars went back and forth with his input. The final guitar had a Duncan 59 in the neck and a Duncan Hot Rails in the bridge. Having come from Vintage Instruments, Stern said he had to play in the new guitar, but once that was accomplished, he stayed with it, playing that same guitar all these years later. The resulting production model, the 1511 MS, has been popular, particularly in Europe, where jazz and fusion continues to do very well for touring players. In the early 2000s, amid a wave of nostalgia, Yamaha released reissues of the SGV and SBV guitar shapes that had started it all in the 60s. Innovative design experiments continued with the RGX-A2 in 2005, an incredibly lightweight and resonant-rich body at just 5.5 pounds. In 2010, they began a reissue run of the SG guitars that put them on the map back in the 70s, but in many more configurations. Still heavy and still loved by many, including jazzer Kurt Rosenzweigel. December 2015 saw the introduction of the first version of the Revstar Guitars. For me, a motorcycle guy from way back, I love the cafe racer and steampunk sort of finishes. This influence came from Yamaha working with a design firm in London that looked to integrate cafe racer culture with many of the design details from the very early Yamaha electric guitars. Of course, Yamaha, as a company that also builds motorcycles, this was a perfect tie-in. The resulting guitar was both familiar and fresh in a way you almost never see catch on in the guitar world anymore. The guitars were clearly designed as a Les Paul alternative with their 24 3/4 inch fretboard radius. In just about every configuration of a 2-pickup mahogany set neck instrument you could imagine, they quietly began building a fan base, gaining visibility with the help of 2 young and amazing players, Matteo Mancuso and Chris Buck. In March of 2022, they released the 2nd gen Revstars. The changes in the model came directly from player input over the previous 7 years. The Gen 2s have slightly larger bodies, but incorporate chambering to enhance the resonance of the guitars. The new Revstars have these chambers to tune the body along with adding carbon fiber to the body to help transfer resonance in the Japanese-made guitars. There's also carbon fiber in the neck, which has moved to a 12-inch fingerboard radius. All the new models have satin neck finishes, different than the original gloss necks on the Revstar Gen 1s. Again available in a wide range of finishes and pickup configurations, they really do seem to be picking up where the first gen Revstars ended off. And the cafe racer aesthetics with racing stripes and paint fade colors are still here, which makes me happy. A lower priced range built in Indonesia and a higher level built in Japan. Reviewers agreed that the only issue with this is that the Indonesian guitars are of such high build quality that the reason for going all the way up to the made in Japan model is fairly subtle. The guitars are familiar and yet still have a unique voice that seems to be inspiring to players like Buck. Buck plays many types of guitars, but he says that the Revstar is the guitar that feels most like him. Like the Gen 1 Revstars, the awareness of the value provided by both the Indonesian and Japanese-built Revstars seems to be quietly building. And just as I was finishing the edit to the video script, Yamaha has announced a reworking of the venerable double-cut 6-on-a-side Pacifica model guitars in 2 new levels, the Pacifica Standard Plus and the Pacifica Professional. They both sport pickups branded as Reflectone that were designed with studio gear legend Rupert Neve. The guitars have a 42mm Graph Tech nut and a quick access truss rod adjuster like you'd see on a high-end custom S-style guitar out of New York. The Professional model adds a compound radius fretboard and has the made-in-Japan craftsmanship. Both models have stainless steel frets and Wilkinson & Goto hardware. Again, like the Revstar reworked from 2022, the challenge here seems to be that the Indonesian guitars come so wonderfully close to the level and fit and finish of the Japanese guitars that it's difficult to choose between. There are specific features, like the compound radius, that might push you to the made-in-Japan instruments, but in so many other ways, the guitars coming out of Indonesia today are extraordinary. It sort of feels like Yamaha has just now decided to make the electric guitars and basses that their beginnings promised they could. I've always had a fascination with guitar collecting, and I've thought about making a series of videos called The Perfect Two Guitar Collection. Some of those videos could be about doing it with only one brand, and now, for the first time, I think you could really make a case for covering lots of classic tones with just a pair of Indonesian-built Yamahas, one Pacifica and one Revstar. It could be a version of Mike Campbell's famous just one humbucking guitar and one single coil guitar arsenal. I learned a lot about how Yamaha got to their current position in the market, and with all this history, it's great to say that they seem to have finally arrived. If I missed your favorite part of the Yamaha electric guitar and bass story, please put it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. I know from experience that I can count on you. If you like this video, you might enjoy my history on Fender Japan. First, I need to thank John Cordy for letting me mine his excellent playing on Revstar and Pacifica models. I also need to thank Yamaha for the great video clips and classic photos that they have up online. I think their new level of video production have matched their upgrading of the guitars nicely over the last few years. I want to thank everyone that stopped by the online store and picked up a t-shirt, hoodie, hat, or a Stomp preset pack. And in particular, I want to thank the friends of 5 Watt on Patreon. It's the guitar community I've always wanted. You're all 5 Watt world. I just make the videos. If you enjoyed this short history of the Yamaha electric guitars and basses, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. Thanks for hanging with me until the end. Until next time, I'm Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt world.